I shared with you earlier, it's like, we have this good intentions and then something happens and we get thrown off, and sometimes it's out of our controls, but oftentimes it is actually in our control. And there's a couple things I'm going to highlight, and I want you to consider that sometimes the blocks are conscious and sometimes the blocks are unconscious, and it's a very thin line to sort of like identify, where are these blocks coming from. We're going to start by talking about what I call the gremlin. The gremlin is this beautiful concept that was created by Richard Carson, or at least he wrote a book about it. It's called Taming Your Gremlin. Something that I highly recommend. It really gives us a lot of good information. And Richard Carson, he's a psychologist, and he talks about, or uses that word gremlin to describe that sort of naysayer, the part in the little voice that we hear in our head that's always going on, always has something to say, but in particular about whether we can and can't do something. And when you look at your handout, I gave you some exercises to do, because one of the ways to deal with the gremlin is to expose it and to give the gremlin a name and get some information, and then to think about what are we going to do with this gremlin. The gremlin's always there. The gremlin, whether you're aware of it or not, says things about people, like they either like the people, or they're like, why did she say that, or who let them in here, or what's going on. So it's constantly having something to say, and it's usually in the judging category. So if you look at your handout, and I'm going to give you a little bit of an example of my gremlin, and it's changed a little bit. So first time I did this is about 20 years ago. And my gremlin's changed a little bit, and I've also took his ideas and extended it a little bit, because I felt like there was an opportunity to add some things. So describe your gremlin, and when you describe your gremlin, you want to be as specific as possible. So my gremlin is a slave driver. It's never good enough. It's very, the gremlin's very critical. It's constantly berating me about what I shouldn't do. It's a very stern sort of voice, and at sometimes the gremlin can be really harsh. What is my gremlin's name? And my first gremlin, her name was Brunhilde, and if you know anything about sort of, there's a very famous German saga, the Nibelungen saga. It's like, she's a very strong woman. That has like powers that are beyond what, sort of godlike powers. But mine, she's like the Brunhilde, the ass-kicking bitch. So that's my grandma's name. It's like, very tough and very, sort of superpower. And there's a couple ways it shows up. One, it's like the slave driver, but on the other hand, it's also, I don't need anybody. I can do it on my own. Don't come around. And then it's like, what's its favorite saying? What's wrong with you? You need to work harder. You're lazy. Get up. Come on. Like those kind of things. And as you can see, this exercise is really to take this part of you and expose it, and for you to become aware of it, because it exists, and maybe it's not as harsh as mine, as maybe it has a totally different, you have totally different sayings, but it's like you want to know. And here's when it's becoming interesting. It's because the next question is, what's its purpose, job, or role? And my gremlin's role is to not fall apart, okay? To not be weak and not to be dependent on others, because she has a belief, and the belief says that you can't trust other people, and you need to do it yourself. And if you stop working hard, if you start laying on the couch and watching TV and whatnot, then you can become weak, and then eventually you become dependent on others. Okay, so you can see where this is going. Even though this is not real, it's not really connected with reality. It's like, that is what my gremlin is, up to. When does my gremlin tend to show up? So my gremlin tends to show up when I'm unsuccessful, when I'm frustrated, when I'm insecure, and I'm not sure what's next. And I have to tell you, because I've been working with the gremlin for a while, it doesn't show up in its force like it used to. It was much, 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 much stronger, like 20, 25 years ago. It's like, oh my God, always upon me. But now, not so much anymore. What is the gremlin teaching me? My gremlin is teaching me that I'm afraid to be dependent. And as I was doing this exercise, I didn't really, wasn't so aware of it, that really what is going on there is that I don't like to be dependent, because it's like when I'm dependent, then I have to rely on other people. And even though we all rely on other people, and I certainly rely on people in so many ways, the gremlin thinks it's a bad idea. All right, and now we go and have two more important questions that you want to answer for yourself. And the first question is that, based on this information, what new purpose, job, or role could your gremlin fulfill you? So now I do the turnaround, and it's not what the book is talking about. The book's talking about observing your gremlin, loving your gremlin, which is important. But I'm interested to see what I can do with this part inside, and what job can I give it in a more constructive way. So I decided its job used to be an explorer, and to go out and sort of like see what was available and what was out there, and bring that information in. But I added a job description, and that was to encourage me, to rather put me down, to take all that energy and say, you can do it, you're amazing, just keep going, and just like you can take a risk, you can be courageous, and really encourage me to do whatever. And the last question would be, how will you use your gremlin to forward the action in some area of your personal business life? And like I said, this would be really to support me, to go on, to continue, to explore, to risk, and to have my back. And so rather than pushing me down and criticizing me and telling me that I'm not good enough, or that no matter how, whatever I do won't be good enough, to actually say, hey, listen, I have your back, and whenever it gets dicey, or whenever you're going to get in a difficult situation, I will protect you and take care of you, because we're smart, and together we're smarter, and we will come up with a solution. And so when I say that, that actually feels really good, because it's like, it's really awesome to have another part of you supporting you and moving me forward in whatever it is that I want to take on. So that is the gremlin, and I encourage you to answer those questions, because sometimes we can't see the gremlin showing up, and it's easier for other people to see the gremlin, but the gremlin's powerful. And the gremlin is always initially wanting to protect us, because all of you had circumstances that somehow you came up with some ways to survive those circumstances. And I'm using survival in a general sense, like, okay, something happened, and events happened in my childhood, and I created some behaviors in order for me to be okay with that. And sometimes whatever behaviors that we created are no longer working for us. So now we're still having those behaviors 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, whatever, 70 years later, and they're interfering with what it is that we actually want to accomplish.